Story 1. I realized they were not out for my best interests. They did not treat me with respect. There was nothing to talk about. I did not feel for them enough to explain myself and felt fed up enough that I am comfortable with the fact that I possibly hurt them by cutting them off the way I did. Sometimes there is just no reason to discuss things or dignify them with a conversation. Story 2. Sometimes you reach a point where discussing the reasons why is no longer worth the relationship. Story 3. I just realized we were no longer friends and hadn't been for a long time. There was no big argument or drama. With two friends, I realized they chipped away at my self-esteem with comments or said nothing when I needed support. By then, we were down to Christmas and birthday texts, so I stopped replying or sending messages, and then I removed them from my social media. The end. Story 4. I've cut off some relatives and stopped casual friends from turning into close friends before. Not everyone is good for you, and walking away early is much easier than dragging it out for years and making a big production of it. Life is short. Spend it with people who add positives to your life. Story 5. I tend to interrupt people, but the truth is I usually take a step back because I realize I am the one initiating. Then suddenly we just never speak again. In my mind, I can only try so much. If you do not care, why should I? Story 6. I had a friend who was an older woman and a little simple-minded but nice. Suddenly, she had all these online boyfriends from foreign countries who promised various things. We tried to warn her about online dating scams, but she was really into the fantasy of it. One evening, she started taking photos of my 7-year-old daughter and sending them to her boyfriend because he wanted to see pictures of her friend's cute children. I cut her off completely after that. Story 7. Abusive alcoholic brother. Our mother always gets on me about it, saying I shouldn't leave him behind because family is blood. I have a strong belief that family is selective, and I shouldn't have to put up with anyone's nonsense, family or not. Story 8. I did not like the way she handled her divorce and children's custody situation. I am not supportive of her ex-husband either. They are both petty and unpleasant. However, she put her kids through a lot and lied repeatedly to win. I realized that I did not respect her as a mother, and I do not associate with bad parents. Story 9. Once I realized that explaining it to them was not going to change their behavior in a way that would allow them back into my life, I did not care if they understood why they were no longer in my life. Story 10. I used to be involved in drugs. I joined the military, but all of a sudden, I had nothing in common with those people. Story 11. My mom had a niece who was raised as a sibling. She was an entitled, bratty adult. My mom was a very forgiving woman. I am not. One day, my mom came home crying and upset after probably the 10,000th time she hurt her feelings. I have never spoken to her since that day. It happened in 2002. My mom passed away at 62 years old. She was present at hospice because my sister called her when we knew my mom was passing. I was very frustrated with my sister. She was also a witness to the abuse. She did not deserve to be there. Story 12. I cut off an entire group of people I had known for years. I was dating a terrible man who cheated on me and did other harmful things. When I broke up with him, he gave my number to many men and claimed that because I had been sexually assaulted before, I was easy. I had to change my number twice. Almost all of my friends took his side and continued to spend time with him because he owned the party house. His mother bought him a house immediately after he graduated high school, and he and his older brother lived there alone. I moved away, deleted all my social media, and changed my number again. To this day, nearly 10 years later, I have not seen any of those people, nor do I know what has happened to them. Story 13. Because every explanation turned into debate, denial, or a guilt trip, protecting my peace was the answer. Story 14. Often, there were plenty of warning signs beforehand. Likely, that person brought up their issues and was ignored or dismissed until the inevitable happened. Ultimately, the only reason someone completely cuts someone else off without explanation is that they know or are reasonably certain that only pain or heartache will follow if they continue. This is especially true if physical violence or other abusive behaviors are likely. Story 15. I became estranged from my parents. They took care of my physical needs growing up, but less so my emotional needs. I did not have the tools to have a conversation about it. I was an adult living on my own at that point, and my parents no longer added value to my life. Story 16. My ex and I had broken up and got back together after he had taken an anger management class and gotten some help. Everything was going great for a while. We only saw each other on the weekends I had off. But he was doing great, got the job he had wanted forever, and was actively working on the relationship. We made some boundaries and were planning to buy a house within the next couple of years. Our Saturday arrived, and I texted him to see what time he needed me to pick him up. No answer. I thought maybe he was sleeping in. I texted him a couple more times and said Sunday was fine if he was too exhausted. Sunday came and there was nothing. Him disappearing was one of the boundaries we had established. 3 days later, he texted apologizing and saying he was so exhausted from his new job that he had to force himself to do laundry and get groceries. I told him a text takes literally 10 seconds and that he had broken a boundary. That was December 19th. I eventually dropped his stuff on his sister's porch. I had all of his belongings and could have sold them to repay a chunk of the thousands he owes me. This man has been in my life since 1985. I've moved on. Story 17. Women who kept hanging out with people who treated them poorly, then repeatedly came to me to cry about it after I had told them it was a bad idea. My count is 3 so far. I now actively avoid anyone in an unhealthy situationship. Burned too many times. Story 18. I cut off a girl I had been best friends with for years because it was clear she started to resent me. She would make little comments, put me down in front of other people, and blow me off for other plans but freak out if I didn't have free time to spend with her when she wanted me there. She had a really toxic on and off relationship. At one point, when they were back together, she told me she could no longer attend an event we had planned for weeks because she would be going with him. We could not have all gone together because he and I had a conflict. I ended up going with a group of other people that included a guy she had been involved with prior to getting back with her ex. She saw me with that group of people and unfollowed me on Instagram, so I blocked her across every platform with no words exchanged. Plenty of other things happened leading up to that, but that was definitely the end. Story 19. They stabbed me in the back so many times I just could not take it anymore. They knew what they did, so there was no reason to discuss it further. The other person insulted me for the last time, and I refused to be verbally abused any longer. Again, they knew what they did. Both times I spoke to them numerous times, and they would not own up to it and continued the behavior. Life is so much better now. I found new friends who respect me and our friendship. Story 20. She was talking all kinds of nonsense just because I was getting more kills in PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. When she started making sarcastic remarks about suicide for the rest of the night, that was the last straw for me. I shut the game off and haven't spoken to her since. Not playing that game every night, avoiding her drama, and no longer listening to her husband and his ridiculous claims about aliens building the pyramids at the loudest volume the TV can go has been bliss. Story 21. I was quite close to a person in my 30s and told them something in strict confidence while having a personal crisis. I just needed to share my thoughts with someone. Another friend then reached out to me within 24 hours to ask about it. I never spoke to that person again. Story 22. She mentally drained me anytime we hung out. She had a superiority complex and used her self-diagnosed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder as an excuse for bad behavior. I just got to a point where I said, "No, I'm done with this," and never replied to her messages. Story 23. She kept trying to get me and their stepfather alone together. She would always invite him to any of our hangouts. He had to be the designated driver wherever we went, and he would constantly try to insert himself into the conversation. I told her I was uncomfortable, but things never changed. So one day I just cut her off. Story 24. A racist and misogynistic involuntary celibate showed their true colors when asked to go to a bar for a couple of drinks. The behavior persisted in their online degeneracy, and I saw right through it and cut them off immediately. Alligators do not tolerate disrespect. Have respect for people. Story 25. A few years ago, my younger sister, who I am not close to, got angry that I took some space from family. I needed to actually take the time to process many things from childhood that I never really addressed. When I reconnected, I was telling my boyfriend how happy I was with how healthy the new family dynamic seemed, and his face dropped. He had something to show me. About a month into my processing, my sister, who I am not close to, texted my boyfriend to try to convince him to break up with me. The lies she told were wild. I blocked her immediately. I have not talked to her since. It has been lovely. Story 26. I just waited for her to call me first for once after years of being used and judged for not trying hard enough to carry both sides of the friendship. It has been about 15 years now. For about half of those years, she used to complain to mutual friends that I was shutting her out and never called anymore. However, when someone finally said phones work both ways, the complaining mostly stopped. Story 27. He was in a downward spiral and one of those hard-nosed guys who would not tolerate meddling. Fine, have fun. Fool. Story 28. She only ever tells me about her drama on the phone. Meetings hardly ever materialize, and if they do, she is late. For several years, she has not managed to mount a door to the toilet in her garden hut. She keeps offering me tea and even coffee without once noticing my discomfort with the situation. Story 29. A friend of mine became addicted to drugs. After several years of trying to help him, including allowing him to stay in my house rent-free as long as he stayed clean, which never lasted more than a few days, he eventually had a psychotic break and started acting in a way that made me think he was not safe to be around. Story 30. He was deeply insecure. I supported him emotionally for over a year, validating his pain and struggles, and giving him genuine compliments and advice on how to address his problems. He never changed. Every conversation eventually led back to how much he hated himself, saying his penis was small and that he was fat and short. He weighed 160 pounds, had an average size of 5.5 inches, was 5 feet 4 inches tall, and often lied, telling people he was 5 feet 6 inches. I became tired of reassuring him and watching him rush into relationships, getting engaged within 4 months. Story 31. I met this girl right at the beginning of a 2-year course. The studies were hard, but I was happy to meet her and our common friend group every day. Some friends left the group, some came, but the two of us remained. Sometimes we would text each other about how happy we were to have known each other. She started dating one of our friends, and I was just so happy to see her happy. Fast forward to the beginning of our 2nd year. Suddenly I felt a shift in our friend group. I was used to some jokes about me because I usually had some nerdy references that I sometimes needed to explain. But suddenly, it didn't really feel like jokes. It felt like attacks. It lasted for a few weeks until a friend pulled me aside to tell me that she and her boyfriend had been making me the target of their jokes for a while. They were pretending to laugh at my references while making fun of me behind my back. After he told me, it only took about an hour for me to see that everything he said was right. After every comment I made, she would laugh with her boyfriend, who was also supposed to be my friend, and as soon as I turned my back, they would look at each other and giggle at me. The same day I learned this, I had a terrible day at school. I came home, and my parents were away for the weekend, so I was alone with my thoughts. After all that, I got a text from her. She was asking if I was okay after my rough day. It felt genuine, even though I had seen with my own eyes how she truly acted toward me. That's the moment I realized how much I had been in love with her for the past year. I crumbled and cried the whole night trying to make sense of the mess I was in. After that weekend, I stopped talking to her or any of our friends in the group without a word, and they didn't notice. I reconnected with the friends who had already left the group before, made new friends in my class, and ended up having the best year so far. I also felt validated in my decision after I learned a few things from those who left her before and after me. Her ex, the one who warned me, left her because she wanted him to basically fail his studies with her. When he refused, he started to fear she would hurt him physically. She manipulated some of her friends to get tutoring while bullying some of them. Basically, she was a very toxic person. So yeah, I never regretted ghosting her. Story 32. There is rarely zero explanation. There is usually a long history of someone setting boundaries and the other person walking all over them or asking for something and not having their needs met. The conversation has been exhausted. The other person can feel like there was no explanation, but really, they just did not care until access to you was removed. Story 33. Spoke negatively about me directly to my face. I moved cities for university, so it was easy to avoid further communication. Story 34. Not me, but my wife cut off her best friend from being invited to our wedding. My wife and her former best friend had known each other for years before she and I started dating, since middle school. Naturally, I thought she would be her pick for maid of honor. About 10 months before our wedding, I asked if this was the case, and she told me, absolutely not. She had thought about it and realized that she and her friend had grown apart. The friend would only invite her over for her kids' birthday parties. Despite my wife inviting her to many trips, celebrations, and other occasions over the years, always being told no or not this time. She also believed that her friend might actually be racist. We are an interracial couple, and she noticed that her friend really changed and stopped hanging out with her around the time we started dating. She also heard her friend's husband casually using a racial slur around family and friends. Because of this, she decided not only to exclude her from being maid of honor, but also not to invite her to the wedding at all. She never told her friend about this decision, just let her figure it out. Her friend has never asked or inquired about her exclusion, and they seem to have a mutual, quiet understanding of their former friendship. Story 35. Turned my life around, stopped doing drugs, started working out, and never felt happier until I put all the weight I lost back on. Story 36. I was about to say I did not mean to and thought the other person had a stop sign, but then I realized you are not asking about driving. Story 37. She had a boyfriend who I did not like. He cheated on her, which is important to the story. One night, she told me that his ex had called her on a blocked number and told her he was cheating. She did not believe it. She said despicable things about his ex. One day, I matched with the ex on a dating app. I honestly did not realize it was her and told my friend about it. She went on a tirade saying awful things about the girl. Well, shocker, they broke up because he was cheating. She started hanging out with his ex and doing best friend things together. This stood out to me because if you hated her and thought she was a complete snake, why were you hanging out with her? So I silently removed her on social media and never texted her back. If she could say those awful things about the other girl, how do I know she was not doing the same to me? Story 38. Just not worth wasting any more effort, time, or words. Previous words already mean nothing to them. Peace is far more valuable than any shallow relationship, whether friends, lovers, or family. Story 39. I had enough of her behavior over the 2 decades we had been friends. After she ignored me for a new boyfriend, I sat back and reflected. Had we ever really been best friends? I don't know. I realized she had always used me and put me down, so I blocked her on everything. I stopped talking to her family because they enabled her. It has been years, but I don't think I owe an explanation if I ever run into her. She did not listen the first 100 times I brought up issues, so why bother? Story 40. I invited a friend to an event. He bailed with no explanation while boasting about going to a long-running show on a free ticket that he could have gotten any other time. I realized this was not the first time he had bailed on things without notifying the host. I decided I wasn't going to call him out for it, but also wasn't going to reach out to make plans, which I had always been the initiator of in the past. That was 4 years ago. Also, my mother was about to die. It had been a long time coming and was not unexpected. My cousin came to me with a list of things she felt she was owed as thanks for assisting with my mother's care over the last few years. Then she tried to commandeer the funeral arrangements after my mother passed a few days later. It nearly came to blows, but her husband stepped in to tell her to back down. She is now dead to me, and the next time I willingly see her, she will be in a wooden box about to be buried. I will only be there to make sure they seal the grave properly and to bless it with a liquid offering shortly thereafter. Story 41. She kept telling my abusive ex-boyfriend about my personal matters, which led to his friends contacting me with threats. I did not feel like I could report the threats because the parents of these individuals held high positions in the local police department. Story 42. I had to cut off a parent because they said unforgivable things and smeared my name behind my back. That was awful. He will never believe he is wrong, so it was easier to just disappear. Story 43. She was a good friend. We worked in the same company and lived near each other. It was her last day of work, so she went drinking with the guys. I was the designated driver. They decided to go to a strip club. No problem. I was sober, dressed for work, not for going out, and these were a group of managers, older men, that I would have to continue working with. But for her going away, I was game. She hitched a ride with someone else and went home, slept with him, and got high with him, leaving me as the lone woman with these older men at a strip club. When I finally got home, her boyfriend was there looking for her, and I had to lie to him to cover for her. It has been 30 years, and I am still bitter about it. Story 44. Phone calls and visits were one-sided. When I finally stopped making the calls, no calls came in the other direction, confirming what I had known all along. Story 45. She could not support me or be happy. At my engagement party, she looked sick and disappointed. At my bodybuilding show, where I placed first, she appeared unhappy. At my bachelorette party, she was so down that the other girls asked if something was wrong with her. I got engaged in December after dating for 3 years. She became so irate that I got engaged first that she got engaged in February. Our wedding was in November that same year. Again, she felt the need to have it first, so she rushed her engagement and eloped in August. At my wedding rehearsal, after being married for 2 months to an alcoholic, to whom I told her she needed to wait and not get married in order to support him through recovery, she screamed at the top of her lungs, blackout drunk, "Someone save my marriage!" Then, after I went to the bathroom, she groped my soon-to-be husband and pushed him off her to stage it to look like he came onto her once she saw I was leaving the bathroom. I also found out that while she was a receptionist for someone, she was sexually involved with him, and he was then able to create a senior cloud position for her at a salary 3 times what she was making as his receptionist. Her entire life is a lie. She has never taken accountability. When I texted her that she deserved to find happiness and that I couldn't support her or be her friend anymore after the stunt she pulled at my wedding, she laughed and then posted on her social media on New Year's. New Year. Same me. Because it's taken many years to accept and love who I am. I'll never change. I am considering anonymously informing her employer about what I know regarding her position at the company. This previous boss is now her director and grants her favoritism and illegal privileges, such as free paid time off and staying logged onto Teams without working, among other things. However, I am unsure if this is the retaliation I truly want to pursue. Story 46. I found out he was trying to sell methamphetamine to my sister and kept trying to get her to cheat on her boyfriend with him. He also cursed at my mother on Facebook when she confronted him. He was a childhood friend, and I knew nothing until it was all over, but I never contacted him again. That was 6 years ago, I think. The crazy part is, 3 years ago, my sister overdosed and died. I have no tolerance for drug dealers except for marijuana, which I consider acceptable. Story 47. He cheated on his girlfriend and tried to use me to help hide it. I did not, but his ex never believed, and still does not, that I had absolutely no idea it was going on before that moment. You do not make me into a liar, especially to someone I genuinely enjoyed hanging out with. Story 48. I got tired of them dismissing my interests and always pressuring me into theirs, always calling when they need something and silent when I need help. The day I decided to cut my family off for various reasons, I felt it was the appropriate time to cut them off as well. Story 49. He went from a good friend in high school to making racist jokes, seemingly to push the comedy boundaries in our late teens to becoming fully racist. So I just stopped hanging out with him. It's a shame. Growing up, we looked the same, had a very similar cultural background, and held most of the same political opinions. I don't know what slowly morphed him into a monster. It might be that he came from a wealthy family. It might be that he found himself stuck in a spiraling, depressing relationship for about a decade. Story 50. It had been building up for years. I'm going to try to keep this short because I usually write paragraphs to explain the backstory. Mom got overly involved in my life and didn't want to let go of control. For example, she got mad anytime I suggested I get my own bank account that she couldn't see or nag me about. She would cry or get angry at me because I don't want kids. It was very controlling behavior when I was trying to establish myself in my 30s. One of the most unhinged things was when she came to my house and insisted I rake up and throw away the leaf mulch from my tree because it looked trashy. The final straw was when she assumed I hadn't introduced her to my boyfriend of 10 months because she thought he was black. We are white, and she said she wouldn't approve. I told her that was pretty racist, and she said, "I'm not racist." I got up and left. I wrote a fairly lengthy email afterward explaining everything I'd been bottling up, and she denied everything. It has been almost 5 years. Story 51. The only time I did not directly address it was after I finally cut all contact with my mother. Even leaving out the list of things she put me through in childhood and adolescence, the final straw was her filing false reports with the Department of Child Services and trying to groom my then 6-year-old daughter to move in with her. She then barged into my home after I tried to go no contact, assaulted me, and had to be forcibly removed by my husband. I cut off every family member that took her side. They do not deserve any respect. Story 52. I went no contact with my brother. I believe he has narcissistic personality disorder. He hated my husband and my children. He had been rude to us for a long time, but my parents were alive, so we had to tolerate him. He would make plans for the extended family events and intentionally give my family incorrect instructions and times, causing us to be late or miss the event. He would insult me in public with cruel and nasty comments. He left his wife on her birthday and was unbelievably cruel to her for his mistress, who was 20 years younger and had been in his life for 20 years. The final straw was when both my parents died at different times. He arrived first and took everything from the house that was left to me in their wills, including photo albums, pictures, and little family items before I arrived. He also made threatening remarks toward me. After my mother died, I allowed him to handle the estate, and then I was done. I have not communicated with him since and will never do so again. Story 53. Toxic friendship. They would only contact me when they wanted a ride or technical help, but never actually cared about me as a person. However, I was cut off by someone and I still have no idea why. I have reviewed our last messages and interactions and still do not understand what happened. Story 54. I was a teenager and another kid decided to befriend me, aggressively become my friend. He was kind of an outcast, an arty kid, overweight, effeminate, which in the 1980s would immediately get you called homophobic slurs. I was also an outcast myself, being arty and generally not in the alpha group. I never picked on him, though, like the other kids did. I guess he saw me as a kindred spirit. I didn't feel the same, but I was too polite and too much of a people pleaser to shut it down. I wasn't fond of him at all. He was a nice enough guy, but a constant motor mouth. One of those people whose brain didn't work if his mouth wasn't moving. I hung out with him for at least a year, and he was constantly talking, punctuating everything with, "Do you know what I mean?" every 10 seconds. I was quickly reaching the end of my rope with all this, and at 13, there wasn't much rope to start with. We had gone to see a movie, and he was talking so much during it that I finally hit the wall with him. The constant frustration of having my ear talked off, the repeated, "Do you know what I mean?" grating on my nerves, his fixation with musical theater, and just never leaving me alone finally reached a boiling point in that moment. I got up without a word, walked out of the theater, and went home. I was done with this guy and just ended the friendship. I didn't even want to have a conversation about it. Done. It was a bad thing to do, but I was a dumb teenager and inexperienced with the nuances of interpersonal relationships. He called a while later, ranting in anger. I told him he never shut up and that I couldn't stand another minute of him. The upside is that he finally left me alone. Not something I am proud of, but there it is. To this day, I am much more direct with people who try to actively befriend me, as opposed to a naturally developing mutual friendship. Story 55. They dated an absolute loser. Over time, she started believing all of the anti-vaccine and anti-intelligence propaganda on TikTok. The last straw was when she told me she voted for Donald Trump and believed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would make food healthier for her and her child to eat. I had enough at that point and unfollowed her on all platforms. Story 56. Friends of over 30 years, 3 of them, voted for Donald Trump knowing it would cost me my job and much of my wife's revenue as a government contractor. I no longer answer their calls and texts. Blocked. They voted for a president whose actions have already cost my family tens of thousands of dollars this year. They acknowledged these consequences would happen under a Trump administration but believed it was best for the country, despite being bad for me. Those are not friends. Blocked. One was the best man at my wedding many years ago. He can go away. Story 57. I knew we had the same interests and hobbies, but they sidelined me while indulging in them with other mutual friends. They also used my past against me during arguments. This person likes to compete and show off when winning but loses interest the moment I catch up and surpass them. I realized that this person is not worth my time, so I removed and blocked them. I still heard that they were asking some friends why I did that while acting innocent. Story 58. Just got tired of his nonsense and drama. 100% of it was self-inflicted. He was a good friend growing up, but if you don't lose friends as you get older, you are not really growing up. Story 59. She treated me like an annoying dog that she needed in her life. I would send her funny images, memes, and cat videos. We would chat like friends. Then suddenly, I would go 3 to 4 months without a response. I wasn't even bothering her. Sometimes I messaged her every other weekend. Some months I messaged her once. Then suddenly we were back to being friends again with constant back and forth. She usually started the messages, then went back to radio silence. There was a social event where both of us were required to be there. We both worked at the same place and I kind of avoided her. I wanted to see if she would come around me. I barely acknowledged her existence other than nodding when I first saw her there. Basically, she tried to make it all my fault because I was emotionally distant. We're not in a relationship. We're just friends, and we constantly joked back and forth with each other. This was so far out of left field that I was just done. Story 60. Opposite side here, but my wife's eldest child cut her off 8 years ago when he was about 15, and we do not know why. They were having a lot of conflict at the time about his school performance. She was stricter than his father. He just refused to come over anymore, refused to talk to her, and refused to return her texts. No explanation. She is not a perfect person or parent. None of us are. However, she is a good, kind, and loving one. She has good relationships with her other children and with mine. He just decided he did not want her in his life. Story 61. I cut off one long-term friend when it became obvious he had no respect for me. I often felt bad about myself when I was around him. I had known him for about 14 years. When we lived in the same city, I would see how excited and happy he was to see other friends but not me. That always hurt me. We went on a long driving vacation around Colorado, just the two of us. I realized he was planning to drive to tourist spots without me like the $1 Million Highway, thinking I might get worried by the heights and ruin it for him. But he had just planned to go and didn't ask my thoughts until I insisted I wanted to come. Many times he would put down my opinions. His boyfriend was always right about everything. I would say I liked a singer and he would say, well, my boyfriend says he can't sing, and that's his job to choose good singers. As if I was wrong to like someone. I could see the bad influence this new man had on him, thinking opinions were absolute facts if either of them held them. At the airport on the way home, I went through security first as he was dropping off the car. We live in different countries now, and my flight was first, so he dropped me at departures. Then he wouldn't come through security to say goodbye. He said, my flight isn't for 2 hours. Laughing out loud. I'm doing some work emails. Even though we probably wouldn't see each other again for a year or two, I just knew it was time to walk away, and I never spoke to him again. Story 62. I cut off my former best friend because his wife was horrible. The straw that broke the camel's back was on his birthday. I drove 5 to 6 hours to attend. I picked up people who lived an hour away because they were on my way. The plan was to eat dinner, then attend a sporting event. I chose not to drink more than about 3 beers because I had a 5 to 6 hour drive back in the morning. To save money on rideshares, I drove people around and didn't charge for gas or parking. The plan was for me to take everyone home after the sporting event because my friend and his wife lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, so all 4 of us could not stay there. After the sporting event, his wife exploded at me, screaming that I ruined his birthday. We stayed in contact for about 6 more months and met up a couple more times. But I realized I was the only one texting or calling because he would get in trouble with his wife for talking to me. So I stopped. Life has been fine. I have no idea what he is up to. He doesn't post on social media, and his wife blocked me everywhere. I honestly don't care. We all warned him not to date her and then not to marry her. They had a child, but I assume he does the majority of the parenting. Another note, she blocked her own mother from everything because her parents got divorced. She found out her mother was seeing someone else while they were separated but not fully divorced. She claimed it was cheating. Her mother had to find out she was pregnant with her first grandchild from my ex-friend's mother. Her mother put her through college because her father had been an unemployed alcoholic for the last 10 years of their marriage. Story 63. I realized I was always the one reaching out, checking in, and supporting them. When I stopped, so did the friendship. That silence was the answer. Story 64. There was an explanation. It was repeated many times. They just blocked it out or refused to accept it. Story 65. We were a friend group of 4 and we generally collected money for birthday gifts. We had a usual amount. For my birthday, 2 of them told the third they would get me something separately and then arrived at my home to celebrate with nothing. That's fine, whatever. But the next week, one of them created a group chat for us to plan the other's birthday and asked me to contribute to a very expensive present for that friend. I would have had to pay about 5 times the usual amount. I told her that since she chose the gift without consulting us, I would pledge the usual amount and that was that. A few days later, she was in a car crash. Suddenly, she could not afford to pay the difference herself for a gift her mother-in-law was making and asked us for more money. I sent her $5 and never spoke to either of them again. I did not go to the party. She still does not understand why I was upset by their combined audacity. Story 66. I had a childhood friend whom I have known all my life. Her husband and mine became very close, and we often spent time together as couples. However, 3 years ago, my husband decided to stop drinking. After that, the invitations stopped, and now we see each other maybe once a year. We brought it to their attention, but they did not acknowledge it. So we gradually drifted apart. Story 67. A good friend from a very wealthy family was trying to get his personal project up and running. I helped and never asked for anything because that is what friends do. There was a lot of talk along the lines of, "When this gets huge, I will make sure you are repaid." One day, after a year of false deadlines, 14-hour days, and sleepless nights, he shut down a web server I had a dozen customers on with no explanation. I spent an entire sleepless weekend moving them, with no access to files or databases. Those customers helped keep my lights on, which is more than he ever did. It was the final straw, and I cut him off on the spot. 21 years later, he emailed me out of the blue, saying, "How are you, mate? We should catch up." He succeeded and became a household name in our field of expertise. I was polite, wished him the best, but explained there was an issue and made it clear in no uncertain terms that I was not going to sell out to him or work for him, and that we were done. He still does not know what that issue was. Story 68. If we have reached the point where I am going no contact, I do not owe you anything, including an explanation. Story 69. A former friend was treating me with disdain. I realized he had been treating me poorly for a while, but I was in denial. He had started using methamphetamine as well. This was a man in his 50s. I let go and he never reached out either. He died alone and was unfound for a couple of weeks. I still miss my friend, not the methamphetamine addict. Story 70. A mildly autistic friend called me an entitled jerk and refused to hear nuance on the issue. It wasn't serious, and I've realized maybe I was in the moment, but I can also see the other side. However, his inappropriate comments at inappropriate times were becoming too much. Disability aside, joking about death can be dicey. My grandmother was dying. The joke, though not about her, shouldn't have been made. That other jokes, and by his own admission, sometimes using his autism to run roughshod over other people, boundaries, and social norms. He doesn't seem to care sometimes, and while I like that we can say anything, some things just kill goodwill. He knows right from wrong, and I'm wondering if he's realized why I haven't said a word since he called me that yet. It might take a few months, and that's okay. Sometimes it takes me a while to understand I shouldn't have said or done that, and to apologize. But I know when I'm wrong and will apologize for whatever I did. I'm mildly disabled too, but this level of behavior is too much. As another autistic friend says about it, there are jerks and autistic jerks. He seems the latter. I don't know. It feels like the friendship may have shifted, and I'm unsure how to feel or what to do. Maybe calling a friend an entitled jerk and still standing by the words weeks later, even though they're trying to explain they can now see the other view, is not the best idea. I love him to bits, but he's tiring. That said, I can be too. But this was thrown like a slap in the face, and seemed to have a real forget you behind it. Feels unforgivable, and that's maybe hard to explain or understand if you're not disabled. But you don't question someone's career path to their face unless they already have. All this makes me rethink the friendship, and that's difficult. I don't like the thought, but since taking a bit of distance, life seems calmer. Maybe that's my answer. I miss my friend though. Story 71. He was dragging me down and had zero ambition in his life. We met when we were both 16, and at that time he was the coolest dude ever, always ready to party. Fast forward, we are both in our 30s now, and his life still revolves around the next party, where he intends to get blackout drunk and hit it off with just about every girl. Of course, he never had a job for long, so money was always tight. He also had many health issues due to his excessive drinking, and nothing was ever his fault. He was a perpetual victim of circumstances. It was not like nobody was willing to help him either. He even lived rent-free at my place for half a year after his ex kicked him out. He trashed my place and still owes me several $100. One day, I simply told him to pack his stuff and get out. None of us ever contacted the other after that. Story 72. I was the only one making an effort to get in touch. I stopped doing that to see if she, my former friend, would bother to reach out. She never did, so I decided to take the hint. Then she complained to my partner that I was being strange, and her teenage daughter started being rude to me as though I had done something terrible to her mother. Story 73. They became toxic, undermining, and negative. I got tired of listening to their pointlessly hostile nonsense and thinking, forget this? Who do they think they are? Story 74. I just get tired of people's tedium. People rarely come around. When they do, they drain the energy in the room. I don't want to fight with them. I don't want to form traumatic memories. I don't want any big dramatic events. I just don't want their toxic influence in my life anymore, so it is much easier to let the relationship die. If people really valued me, they would know my number and have my address. I'm not blocking them from knowing me. I'm just no longer going out of my way to experience their toxicity. Story 75. She tried once too often to bully me into staying out later to drink with her. She hid my purse, ordered me drinks I did not want, and tried to guilt me into accepting them. I understand she is not in good health these days. Story 76. They were cruel to my dying mother and made her death about themselves. So I cut off a lot of family. A friend accused my then boyfriend of groping her. We were away in London that weekend. Annoyingly, we were both private, but we had to post a highlight story the Monday we got back. Luckily, we had been at a concert the night she claimed he groped her and had some videos of us singing along really badly because he loved taking videos. I found out first, uploaded everything to my story, and told him to add it all to his story. Luckily, he did it. Bless the inner people pleaser in him. I managed to call him afterward when I knew he'd be free to give him a heads up. Then, after lunch, he got called in by his manager, and because I had told him why I made him add everything to his story, he was still panicking but rational enough to show the proof. It also meant his friends in the department knew she was lying too. Apparently, she did not expect it to go as far as it did. She just wanted me to break up with him because she fancied him. But the rumors had spread to my department and his. Story 77. I attempted to reconnect after a year or so and realized this person had taken no accountability for the initial reason I needed to cut them off. Story 78. I stopped talking to my grandparents on my mother's side. They always thought my father wasn't good enough for my mother and made sure he knew. I am a man and have two older sisters. The oldest is my half-sister, and my mother was a single mother, so she was absolutely spoiled by them, cars, money, college paid for. My other sister was spoiled, but not to that extent. They obsess over my cousins. They don't like me, probably because I look so much like my father. My grandfather has a gun collection and takes my cousins shooting often. He knew I was interested but never trusted me. I have 0 driving under the influence offenses while the cousins and half-sister have a combined 5. He even asked my very liberal sister to go shooting. He directly told me he didn't trust me. My birthday is 4 days before my cousin's birthday. My grandmother sent the family group chat an update about my cousin and wished him a happy birthday. I received no mention. When I was visiting before going to college, I wasn't allowed to stay over with my girlfriend. I had to get a hotel. The cousins and siblings got to stay over with their significant others. They live in a renovated old bed and breakfast with empty rooms. My last straw was when they never bothered to visit my mother after her early onset dementia diagnosis. I have 0 contact with them now. When I saw them at my sister's wedding, I just nodded and sat on the other side of the room from them. They have reached out recently, but I don't need them now. I needed them when I was a child. They are old now and will probably die in the next 5 years or so. I won't attend the funeral. I am leaving out many other terrible things they did, including physical and emotional abuse. I wish my father's parents were still alive instead of them. I'm not sorry. Story 79. I realized I had been asked repeatedly to lie for them to any woman they dated. They were continuously driving intoxicated, gaslighting about it, running around town being incredibly irresponsible, and sleeping with married women. They had multiple car accidents while admitting they were intoxicated, but blamed the other drivers because they drive better high or drunk. For a while, I tried to be supportive, but it didn't work. When I asked for space, I was met with constant attempts to contact me, and I realized that ever since we were kids, there was no respect for any boundary. It was like I was seeing this person clearly for the first time. I blocked them and moved on. They kept trying for a few years, but it has been quiet lately. Sometimes your friends don't grow up into the best people. Maybe I should have spent some time explaining why I was stepping away, but they never gave me the opportunity. The second I asked for space, they started non-stop pestering me and my husband, even texting him to say they don't want to cause issues in our marriage, which was strange. I was not willing to ignore my own boundary about contact. I hope they grow up someday. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.